Welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the Virgo Solar Eclipse, which occurs across the 21st or the 22nd of September. It's the first in this zodiac sign for 19 years. And in this particular eclipse series, which goes between the signs of Virgo and Pisces, it will be the only one in this season, which concludes next year on the 28th of August with a lunar eclipse in Pisces. If you recall, the whole process started with a lunar eclipse in Pisces on the 18th of September last year. But if we go back to when the sun arrived this year into Virgo, we immediately had a new moon, and that new moon was encouraging us to grapple with all the good things that Virgo energy is about. But that was challenged by the lunar eclipse of the 7th of September in the much more sensitive, ephemeral, dreamy, drifting energies of Pisces, which is a water sign. If we think about the best of Pisces energy, it can be very much to do with caring, compassion, sensitivity. It can also be to do with the things that are intangible that we can't necessarily see. Whereas Virgo energy is very much about the here and now. It's what we can try to order to make work for us in a functional, efficient way. It's the sign of practical virtue. So we're looking, or have been looking, through this particular period to create order. We're trying to make things work better. But of course, Virgo energy is very much to do with attention to detail, which comes from its ruler, Mercury. Mercury here, very much about analysis. It's very much to do with discernment. It can be meticulous. It's really honing in on the details. And at its worst, its lower energy, of course, it can be rather critical and a little bit intolerant. So what we have been seeing ever since the nodal axis went into the sign of Pisces, which was January last year, we have seen a kind of fight going on between what people feel should happen in a more functional way and perhaps pushing back on the more spiritual and psychological dimension of life. And that has seen, in some ways, a challenge towards people who may not be thriving so much and are more surviving. And that's the energy that's being played out. But the best of Virgo energy, and this can be demonstrated by this solar eclipse as well, it encourages us in terms of the moon to get our house in order, because the moon is very much about our home. So whether it is leaping off the sofa, if you're born again couch potato, and decluttering, moving the furniture around, getting those drawers working that you can hardly open, cleaning the fridge that you haven't touched for absolutely ages, that's the practical environmental energies of the moon. But the moon is obviously very much about feelings. And one of the things that I think can happen with Virgo energy is it makes it much more difficult to see the big picture, or to be open to what isn't necessarily provable or straight in front of our eyes, which is very much that Pisces energy. The sun, however, which is very much more to do with vigour, is pushing us to reflect on our physical routines, our well-being, what we eat, what we drink, the amount of rest and sleep we get, but critically the amount of exercise we get as well, and look to make marginal gains to improve our situation in a more precise and organised way, which of course doesn't sound very glamorous. But if we do a lifestyle audit on this particular event, I think it can be very good for our physical energy and vitality, but also we need to be very conscious of that other side of the heavens, because we have the modern ruler of the sign of Pisces, Neptune, opposing this eclipse. It is a disassociate opposition, but it's very, very close. But of course we have Saturn, the planet of coolness, of limitation, of resistance, also in an opposition to the energies of this eclipse. And Saturn can be a very hard hoe. So if we're trying to get things going, whether it's in an emotional, practical way with the moon, a physical, practical way with the sun, or we're tuning into the things that perhaps feel out of kilter in our lives, that we're dissatisfied and we're focusing a lot on them, I think it's very important to bring in that Pisces energy. Don't disassociate from it, because at the end of the day, astrology is a constant process of trying to find a balance. So we need to be honest about where we are, and that does require in some ways a degree of self-critique, but not criticism. If we're flagellating ourselves for all our weaknesses, which we all have, that actually can deflate our emotional energy, which comes from that vibe of Pisces. Virgo, of course, is also very much to do with work, responsibilities and obligations. If you're not really feeling it in what you're doing at the moment, it's not giving you much personal satisfaction, it's time for a review. And this particular eclipse, because of the stern energies of Saturn, could suggest if we work in an environment where the atmosphere is not very good, or there is a lot of a person standing over our shoulder trying to micromanage us and not giving us much of a chance to do what we can do, that can be very oppressive. But if we really seize this opportunity, despite the limitation of Neptune and Saturn, there is a potential for an improvement, for healing, because Virgo can be very much to do with trying to be more careful about our personal hygiene, perhaps scrutinising what's in packets of food that we're eating. You know, can we make things a bit more natural, make things from scratch, don't have a convenience and ready meals so much, because that's being very virtuous, but that also feeds into our soul, which comes from that energy in Pisces. But essentially, the solar eclipse is asking us to go with it with that Virgo energy. But when we get round to the next lunar eclipse on the 3rd of February in this series, guess where it is? It's in Virgo. But at that time, the sun will be in Pisces. So this juggle that we need to get between what we can do in a functional way, but how we can also bring in our own personal compassion, and just be aware that the energy of Pisces at times can be very nebulous, very subtle, but also can drain us. So for example, if we're not really dealing with our inner world that's not working very well, that can have an effect on our physical energy and vitality. So that's the overall principles of this particular event. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please help it to continue to thrive by doing so now. You can download your free 6-month Survive and Thrive manual by clicking on the link beneath this video. Also, if you'd like to work with me one-to-one, please check out my testimonials below. I'll share a few on the screen now. Now, I mentioned before about how this does go across the 21st and the 22nd. So for everywhere in the world apart from India and Australia, it's the 21st. So on the screen now, the exact timings for you. Now at 29 degrees and 4 minutes, of course, that very, very well-known degree, the degree of fate, that's powerful in itself. But did you know that the movement of eclipse is very closely tethered to the lunar nodes? And as this event, this particular event occurs, they're stationary. And that's said to bring a much stronger dimension to the situation. So the next 6 months, I feel for us all, we're going to be much more aware of how our physical well-being is affected by our spiritual and emotional state, but also vice versa. So in other words, they are all part of the same thing. I think what can happen through that desire for order and through being perhaps a bit sharp and intolerant, which can be the worst of Virgo energy, is that we can be a bit hard on ourselves, but we can also be hard on other people. And we are seeing, of course, a lot of fierce debate between people with very, very polarised opinions. And essentially, if we can all just be very conscious of the way we use our language, Mercury is the communicator after all, that's going to be a good thing. But did you know the Sun and the Moon in the sign of Virgo are known as being peregrine? Peregrine means that they're neither dignified nor in their detriment. But intriguingly, the ruler of the sign of Virgo has just moved from the sign into the sign of balance of Libra, and there Mercury is in peregrine. So that's quite interesting, and it's said to suggest there's kind of less framework, there aren't the guardrails, so don't quite know what to do with themselves, if you like. But what we can take from Mercury is that Mercury is forging a dazzling alliance with Uranus and Pluto. And if ever there was a time to try to improve our communication by sharpening up our listening skills, Mercury in the sign of balance, Libra, and very much about relationships and fairness, but also being open to the fact the world is changing at a huge pace. Uranus in Gemini is transforming our communications at such a rate of knots, and Pluto of course is very much the planet of the collective, but it's in the sign of community, so we're all being interconnected in a transformational way, particularly through technology. But if there are some great ideas you've got and they can help people, because the sign of Virgo likes to provide assistance but in a practical way, but so does the sign of Pisces, but often in a very compassionate way. So they both have that desire to help out. But what I want to do now is share with you the event chart. So the solar perspective assumes the ascendant at 0 degrees Aries, which is the start of the zodiac. There is the retreating Neptune just at 48 minutes in that first dward, the first 2.5 degrees of Aries, and there is Saturn at 28-27. But look at the position of the moon, not quite with the sun, so it's a bit different of course from the exact new moon chart, so it's around about 5 minutes away from the exact conjunction. But Saturn opposite the moon, that is very, very tough. If you have Saturn influences on your moon in your natal chart, it may have affected your confidence. You may have encountered people who are cold, repressive, not very caring or kind, and that could be something we're all going to experience over these next 6 months. But we also have Neptune in the mix, and Neptune of course can evaporate, it can wash away, it can erode the substance of things. And so opposite the sun, as much as the sun wants to do good deeds in the sign of Virgo, Neptune can find ways to deflect. And Neptune and Saturn together, as they have been pretty well since the 25th of May when Saturn moved into Aries, they have had an impact, I feel, on everyone's vitality. So a lot of people have been saying this year they feel drained, washed out, not so good. But there are some strengths in this chart. I want to make you aware of the fact that in the zodiac chart, the sun and the moon, of course, are in house 6. But look at the position of Pluto to the new moon. It's actually very strong, suggesting if we're open to change and we can go with it and we don't resist it, there are opportunities. Pluto also links back very well to Saturn and Neptune, so there are opportunities. But I'm going to share with you now the natal event chart, based on Greenwich, because of the prime meridian, based on universal, and this gives us an ascendant at 24 degrees in the sign of Taurus. And intriguingly, we have the path of fortune on that ascendant. I wonder what that will hold for us really, because if we look at where the positions of the sun and the moon are, and Saturn and Neptune, they do almost reflect the solar event chart, except that Neptune has moved into the 12th house. And of course, Neptune moving through the sign of Pisces full time since 2012 has seen an explosion, it seems, in the need for escapism. But it would appear very much through drugs, you know, whether it is illegal drugs, prescription drugs, people feeling the pain, wanting to escape, alcohol too. And in some ways, the whole concept of victimhood, which can be a very strong part of the more negative vibe of Pisces, has also come very much to the fore, which some people who are much more practical, down to earth, and take responsibility seriously, so much more Virgo in their ways, have found very difficult. And we are seeing a readjustment. And as ever with everything, there is a middle point to be gained. It doesn't have to be entrenched in the extremes. That's when I feel life gets really quite tough for us all. So some moderation of our language, our approaches, having a degree of tolerance, but also taking responsibility. You know, we can't always expect, for example, a public health system like in Britain to look after us if we're not looking after ourselves. And those old-fashioned principles, I think, are what we need to embrace. Then there's nothing wrong with them, but also there are some people who maybe struggle that we still need to be careful not to exclude them because they don't quite fit the formula that other people who find life a bit easier feel they should. But so we have the 6th, 12th house energy, that competition that's reflected by the energy of each zodiac sign. Not exactly. More serious astrologers really bulk at the idea of matching houses to sun signs, quite rightly, but we get an echo. But the intriguing thing is, whilst Neptune moves into 12, Mercury moves into 6, even though it is now in the sign of Libra. So Mercury there is asking us to find a balance, but also asking us to keep the communication open. Very important to do that. We're also on the cusp of Mars relocating into its traditional home sign of Scorpio, along with Aries, and also seeing cardinal quadrant 3 come in with the Libran autumnal equinox, which occurs on the 22nd. So this is an incredibly intense and powerful time for us all. But about those nodes, so those nodes are still retrograde but stationary. But in the event chart, the North Node is actually in the 11th house, which is much more to do with how we network. So that's suggesting to me that it's important with the Taurus ascendant to keep it real. We know that bills need to be paid. We want to have some stability and security. But the North Node's saying, keep that awareness to perhaps how it is for those who might not have it so easy. But if we can find a better balance, a more harmonious balance, a more joined up and homogeneous blend between the physical, practical energies of Virgo and the more psychological, emotional and spiritual energies of Pisces, we can work with this particular eclipse well, but we need to be conscious that with the headwinds of the restrictive Saturn and the draining Neptune, we probably can't set ourselves too many targets. We need to be realistic. And I think generally through this last part of 2025 and going into the start of 26, because remember this eclipse provides a backdrop for 6 months, I feel that we are going to still find that physical and emotional energy are very delicate. Now, who is this going to impact most of all? Well, clearly if you have got late degrees in any of the mutable signs, so that's Gemini, Virgo itself, Sagittarius or Pisces, you're on the angle of this event. So in the terms of Virgo, it's a conjunction, Sagittarius and Gemini square, and with Pisces it is an opposition. But the same can be true if you're early cardinals, so that's Aries, that's Cancer, Libra and Capricorn. If you've got planets right at the start of those cardinal signs, you're going to feel this energy very strongly, because essentially what Saturn and Neptune are doing is they're impacting on all 8 of those zodiac signs. If you've got degrees very early in cardinal, very late in mutable, you're going to feel those energies. And Saturn requires hard work, it requires discipline. If we're not embracing our fears, our anxieties, our doubts, getting in touch with the deeper part of our nature, things that have been hidden, I feel that could be very much to do with this particular eclipse, because if we think about it, Saturn's coming to the end of its total journey, 29.5 years on the 14th of February, And then we start a completely new cycle. We had the first blush of Saturn into Aries earlier this year, 25th of May, 1st of September, but it's coming back for the longer haul, 2.25 years, from the 14th of February. So we're coming to the end of a giant cycle. So Neptune has nibbled into Aries this year. That's coming to the end and the beginning of its huge cycle of over 170 years. We've also got Uranus at the start of a new cycle from 84 years ago. So these are really huge times for us all. No doubt about that whatsoever. But I feel that the revelations that could come are going to switch things from how they've been recently. We have seen, it seems to me, a lot of intolerance. We've seen a lot of cruel language. We've seen cruel events. We've seen people using energies in a very negative way. So that energy of Pisces, in its positive sense, is something we need to fight to maintain. If we all get caught up in a chase for perfection, it's going to be an empty process, because, do you know, at the end of the day, there is no perfection. There isn't. We can seek it, but it isn't there. What we can do is try to do our best. Very Virgoan for sure. So we need to make order from the chaos. We need to overcome criticism and still retain some compassion. Please know you can download that free 6-month Survive and Thrive guide underneath this video. Lots of people have downloaded this already, and it is really, really good. Shows all the illustrations of how eclipses work and gives you lots of key pointers to work through. It's a workbook, so you can make this work for you. Now, I need to briefly tell you that as year 2026 speeds towards us, you can order your personal transits forecast for next year. I'll give you the rest of this year free. You get 30% off, and also your life roadmap report. So that's based on your natal birth chart and helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far. But now you can also, with your order, get your free Zodiac, General, Love, Indian and Chinese written forecasts for each of the 12 signs in my PDF booklet. So they're free, and you get the rest of this year free in your transit forecast, but also your life roadmap personality profile, and the combination of the two takes you through to the end of 26. Great value, 30% off, plus those 3 booklets too. Now I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. So Aries, you may find yourself revisiting some old ground between now and February next year, but don't resent it, but most of all don't resist it. If thorny issues arise, it's likely because they need to be resolved once and for all. Your physical energy may be affected by your emotions more than usual, so embrace that sensitivity rather than trying to push through it. Anything therapeutic or healing can definitely give you a powerful boost. So if you can create an opportunity to get to the gym, have a swim, a walk in nature, have a spa day, perhaps enjoy a therapeutic treatment, then I think that will be very good for your soul. Now, Taurus, for you, Virgo is a fellow earth sign, and the 5th house, as you had with the first new moon in the sign of Virgo, gives you a chance to showcase your creative talents, ideas, and the things that you're passionate about. It may be that your social situation gets more attention in the next 6 months, but in order to really create the opportunity fully, I think you have to have the confidence to embrace your true uniqueness. But if your long-term direction, which is illustrated by Saturn, to be honest, or around a friendship or around a romance, isn't quite feeling right for you, this eclipse is pushing you to perhaps break free and do something on your own terms. And that's not easy for a sign like yours that really appreciates continuity and stability. Now, I know Uranus has been pushing you in recent years to be much more rebellious. And before that, you've obviously had Pluto going through your 9th house, which is giving you a lot of extra perceptions around knowledge and information, international travel. It's been very exciting for you, but that natural tendency of yours to stick rather than twist is something you may have to challenge if you're stuck in some kind of situation which is a status quo, but you're not really feeling it. So if you're not demonstrating the full range of your brilliance, that's something you need to test out within yourself. But if you are looking to bring someone valuable into your world romantically, if you have children and their interests and pursuits are something that are very important to you, this can be a very special time. So Gemini, the opportunity for you over the next 6 months could see you thinking about where you live, how you live there, and who with. Are there some improvements you can make, perhaps in a physical sense with some decoration, perhaps moving things around, creating a better home office space? It could be, however, with Saturn on the other side of the heavens, that there are some pretty heavy worldly demands that could at times interfere with your need for peace and tranquility that this solar eclipse is pushing you to enjoy. But is that really where you're at the moment? You've had Mars moving through a very social part of your situation the last 6.5 weeks or so. Mercury, your ruler, has just moved there. It may not feel, particularly as Venus has been making her way through a very, very social, interactive part of your chart, that you need to be so much in touch with your emotional world. But the chances are it is going to come up over this next half year, and the energy of Saturn on the other side of the heavens perhaps suggests some big responsibilities are coming, maybe around your professional role, maybe around being protective of older or younger family members, and that over time could be a little bit depleting. So it's important, even for a very ebullient, bubbly, effervescent, vibrant sign like yours, to just give yourself permission at times to tune out and use that Virgoan energy to create as nice and calm and as ordered space as possible at the very root of your existence. So Cancer, your sign is very much based on perception because of your ruler, the moon, which of course is involved in this event. But with the moon opposite Saturn, it suggests there's going to be some very powerful conversations over the next 6 months. And your natural gift for intuition is very good, but that needs to be balanced with the practicality of whatever you're thinking or discussing. And if you can add that logic to your natural gift for tuning into situations, it will enhance your decision making. The issue, however, is that you could encounter people who see things in a completely different way to you. And when you have encountered conflicts in the past, I feel there has been a tendency for you to withdraw a little bit. And withdrawal is a defense mechanism, and it's one that's important because if we withdraw, pull up the drawbridge, we feel safer. The problem is we're not engaging. The issue doesn't really go away. We're just disconnecting from it. So I feel that what this particular event is encouraging you to do is actually step into any challenges. Have the dialogue. You'll feel better for it. Even if someone doesn't see it the same as you, you can say what you think, and that can be very reinforcing. So stand up for your beliefs. And if you have thought seriously that it's time for you to have a new mode of transport, I think there's every chance you will have that by the end of the next 6 month period. So Leo, we all have to balance the books, and that's not been easy for many of us in recent years. Lots of prices have seemed to have gone up. But the second house is that everyday cost. So that's where we can be perhaps a little bit more attuned to where we can shave off a few things, be a bit thrifty in some areas, and if we are going to be a bit more extravagant, which we all need from time to time, it's a real treat, not on something that doesn't actually give us much gratification. But on the other side of the heavens is the strict Saturn, and if you've got a particular approach to your values or how you value yourself, and you encounter someone who sees your value less than you do, that can actually be very draining, limiting and dispiriting. So in a romantic relationship, for example, if you've been together for a while and one of you likes to splash out and another one of you is uber sensible, that could come sharply into focus over the next 6 months. But the other thing about second house energy, it can be about where we're most attached, and it can also, with that energy of Saturn across the way, can be about where we don't really want to let go of something because we're a little bit fearful. Now, the 8th house energy of Saturn is more about your future financial affairs, but it can also be where you share things, so in business or in a personal situation. So if you're not aligning with another person, that could be problematic for you. But what you can do from this solar eclipse is do all you can to try to keep your books as balanced as possible. So I would say this solar eclipse for you, with Saturn in the mix, is a bit like the 2 of coins in tarot. It's not necessarily going to see you really down on your luck, but just needing to be a little bit thrifty. And if you are, you can still continue to try to investigate ways to be much more dynamic, future forwards. But through this particular eclipse, I think it is important to be as sensible as possible. So Virgo, this eclipse offers you a second opportunity in a month to launch something that you feel is really exciting and can revitalise your affairs. But it's also a great opportunity to inject extra enthusiasm into something that's been ongoing for some while, that maybe has started to drift a bit and lost a little bit of its focus. But you may need to prepare yourself, because not everybody is going to share your enthusiasm. But you can have a lot of inner strength at this time if you're single-minded. And being single-minded is not always so easy for mutable signs, because you're much more aware of how other people might feel, and that can see you flexing. There's another thing to consider. You're at your best when you can help others. You need to help yourself. That can feel a little bit uncharacteristic. But it's also a great time if you do want to really give yourself some kind of glamorous makeover, not least because the luscious Venus has just pitched up in your sign. And if you have gone through a little bit of a worrisome period around a relationship with Venus in the 12th house, or you have had a separation, it's a great time to try to reinvigorate your entire image, because it will give you a huge boost of confidence. So Libra, it's not always easy for you to say no. You have an appreciation of how life feels for others. But ever since Saturn first moved into your 6th house in the sign of Pisces in March 23, but even before that with Neptune through that area since 2012, I think you've given a lot to others. And with Pluto in your 4th house since 2008, maybe at times the more you've given, the less you seem to have felt recognised, appreciated and respected. So you've learnt some big lessons. And of course this year with Saturn being on your 7th house cusp from the 25th of May through to the 1st of September, probably gave you the courage to be more assertive and say no more frequently. But it's also important to understand that this is a new moon, which in a way is a flip of the energy for us all collectively, because it's a new moon that's asking you to get in touch with your sensitivities and vulnerabilities, but use the energy of Virgo in a careful way, but not in a way which ends up persecuting yourself because you feel you're not quite keeping up. And Saturn in the 6th house, as it is again now, can be very draining. And you know, if you haven't felt that you've had quite as much energy as you would like, being a bit depleted, take the opportunity through the end of this year to try to really put some self-help work in, you know, whether it is changing your schedule, whether it is reminding people of the things they can do to assist, particularly at home in terms of the domestic chores, who does and contributes what. But the main thing of this eclipse is to make sure you're not judging yourself for your vulnerabilities, because that's something that could be possible. And of course Mars has been in your sign the last 6.5 weeks or so. Mercury's just arrived and Mars is about to move on, but Mars is going to move into a part of your chart to do with your self-worth. Keep reminding yourself of your self-worth, but also keep reminding yourself of your right to set boundaries. And if you do need to step back and let other people take the load, why not? There are going to be some moments over this next half year when you just need to spin out and just have peace, quiet and tranquility, and anything you can do to get near water, walk in nature, can be extremely positive indeed. So Scorpio, the old saying is that we can't please all of the people all of the time. Having a solar eclipse in the 11th house suggests that a lot of people are going to be competing for your attention through the next half year. I would say it could be over the next 18 months, to be honest. And whether it is friends who feel that you're too focused on a relationship that you've perhaps recently developed, or whether it is a partner who feels that you're too attracted to spending time with your friends, it really could prove quite challenging to keep everyone satisfied. So how do you work with this energy? Well, essentially this solar eclipse is about your future. If your future is aligned in a way that's working for you, your long-term future, you're probably fine. But if it isn't, that's going to give you a lot of celestial food for thought, and you might start thinking about the players in your world, the people who want to spend time with you or make demands on you, because essentially the 11th house is where you get more idealistic, and if you're leading your life in not so much of an idealistic way, the Virgo energy asks you to think carefully about how you could change things, but also how you can do it in a way which keeps people mostly happy. You perhaps won't keep all of them totally happy, but just think carefully, create a bit of a plan if you feel things are a bit out of kilter, because the energies in Pisces, including the North Node, are reminding you of your uniqueness, and it's important that your uniqueness is part of your long-term future plan. So Sagittarius, if you've been striving hard for a big breakthrough in your career, it could come in the next 6 months, which is really exciting, isn't it? But in order to seize this opportunity, you need to make sure that you've got all your support systems in place working well. And over the last few years, your home and emotional life has taken quite a lot of intense energy from Saturn, Neptune, the North Node as well. If you're someone who's comfortable with your inner world, for example, if you have got planets in Scorpio in your natal chart, you may be a Sagittarian that's quite at peace. If you've got your Sun in the 4th or the 12th house, you may be someone who's much more at ease with the emotional dimension. But if that hasn't been the case, and it has felt, particularly with the disruptive energies of Uranus mainly in the part of your chart to do with routines, very Virgo-like, but they've been very elusive, then things may have been quite tough. And things could have felt very unsettled, but if you've really persisted, some kind of breakthrough is possible. But as I mentioned, if you are working towards a big goal, make sure everything's in place to support that. If you're going to be spending more time away, if you need to juggle your time around family needs, think of all the ways that you can flex, and that's one of your great gifts. So Capricorn, venturing into new territories and ideas may seem to go against the grain for the astral archetype of your sign. You're someone who really likes to be very disciplined, work at things in a very sustained, systematic way. But of course Uranus has been challenging that archetype the last 7 years or so, and you've perhaps surprised people, even yourself, at how you've wanted to shake things up at times. But if you want to travel over the next half year, if you want to learn a language, if you want to go back to college and get a qualification that you didn't get first time around, this is a wonderful opportunity to go for it. But if you're someone with a big interest in current affairs and politics and philosophies, with your ruler Saturn in a direct punishing opposition to the position of this solar eclipse, don't necessarily expect everyone you encounter to align with your views. And it just depends how much of that you want in your life. If you want to spend a lot of time having big debates, this is going to be a solar eclipse that will set them up. But if you're wanting more of an opportunity to have more freedom and independence and spontaneity in your world, as long as you get everything organised and ready in your daily functional world, why not? Do things more off the cuff. It will be like a breath of celestial air. So Aquarius, have you got a business idea that you're really serious about? If you're a natural entrepreneur but haven't quite had the opportunity to express that, you may decide that you're going to want to step forwards and do something very exciting around that. It could be in terms of a shared situation, but because your traditional ruler is in opposition and has been really perhaps testing your financial base over the last couple of years, I wouldn't be too quick to go for it. If you are going to be more speculative, it's very important to really check out the details, talk to other experienced people, get some different ideas and input. But where may require a bit more care is where you have shared resources. And the other thing about 8th house energy, it can be very much to do with intimacy, but it also can be to do with where we're most invested emotionally, spiritually, perhaps even around our interests. It can also see where we're a bit perhaps obsessed at times with things. And if there is something that's dominating your life a bit too much, I'm not saying you should stop doing it, but maybe it's a time to assess, very Virgo, whether that's entirely healthy for you, even if the thing involved in itself is relatively innocent, like my watching news too much or someone else gaming too much. They're not in themselves bad things. It's just if we do them too much. The other thing about 8th house energy, it can be about very deep connections, but also where things change in our world. So something could be evolving in a major way. And if you look back to 19 years ago, you may get a bit of a clue at what happened then, because it could be rather similar now. So Pisces, you could find yourself reflecting on relationships of all kinds. As I'm very fond of repeating, and I do apologise if you've heard this message before, because people are very quick to say, I don't want a relationship, Patrick. Why are you talking about relationships? We all have relationships with the person who delivers our parcels, our post, people next door, the people in the local shop. We're interacting with them. Even if we choose not to have particular warm relationships with them, that's a relationship. It's just a cool, detached relationship. And of course we have a relationship with ourselves. But if you are wanting to get just the right balance between what you give and get, in any time of interaction, the next 6 months certainly sets up a time of great importance. But if you're in a relationship that just seems like hard work, and however much you lean into their needs, very Pisces, if they seem cold, detached, critical, very Virgo, don't waste any more time on it, really, because it could be that you are trying too hard. And what we can do if someone's unreasonable is that we can keep trying to find an equilibrium from their recent last piece of bad behaviour, and that actually uses all our time up, and that's not a good relationship. So if there's too much drama and not enough consideration and sensitivity and harmony, give and take, that's when you should really be reflecting upon it. But if you want to bring someone into your life really significant, or you've just met someone, it could prove to be a seminal time for your love life in a very positive way too. Thank you so much for joining me for this Solar Eclipse Deep Dive Special. Remember, you can download that free Survive or Thrive workbook and underneath this video, or please join me at patrickarundell.com, where you can read your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general, love and Vedic horoscope forecast. Enjoy that terrific free card tarot, or sign up for my 3 daily horoscope fired to your device each morning. Take care and all the best.